Yo, what is going on, homies? It's your boy Stumped back for another OPTC video, and in today's video, we're doing a part 3 of the BlackBeard Showcase, the final rendition, and we're taking on the Kid Forest. So this is the team that we are using, as you just guys saw on screen there. Rewind if you do want to try this team. There are a couple of supports that you guys are going to have to bring, but this is basically what the team looks like. So taking on the Kid Forest with BlackBeard was actually a lot of fun. We are using a friend Roger, though. Roger is the sort of the glue that holds this team together, mainly because he can remove Despair. I imagine you could probably put a similar team together with someone else, like another captain that can remove Despair. Off the top of my head, I can only think of Halloween Law. Or Stampede Luffy. Stampede Luffy you could probably use too, but Roger just provides so much more, being a 4.5 times Rainbow Captain. But with BlackBeard, we can actually go through defensive effects, as you guys just saw on the beach stage there. Normally that stage, it's not a big issue, that stage, but normally the 10 turns of damage reduction, the 10 turns of threshold, can be a little bit of an issue, and utilizing specials there is really the only way around that and taking multiple turns. But with BlackBeard, just using the Roger special with, it's my very overkill there, but the main reason we're using that is because we're just going to get his special back by the next time that we need it. So BlackBeard's really, really cool in terms of like that aspect of him, where he can just go through those defensive effects. The downside, as you can see on the screen right now, is with your Rogue, he doesn't go through base defense or doesn't go through defense up. Now, that can be a very serious problem for BlackBeard, and that's actually the big reason why we've brought Boa on this particular team. Because BlackBeard doesn't get through defense up, he only gets through damage reduction and threshold. We do have to try and stall out those defensive effects, but in turn with BlackBeard getting through those barriers, getting through the defensive effects like thresholds, nullified damage, and rainbow shield, he himself or your team can't actually utilize those defensive effects either. So with this particular team, we do have Don Krieg and Jin. Now, Don Krieg and Jin normally give a 20% damage reduction every time you switch with them, but with BlackBeard, it actually just gets negated, and that 20% damage reduction is basically worthless. So having Boa on this team, she's a shooter, which is great, as we do need a shooter on this team, but having Boa allows us to heal. And then with Luffy and Sanji, we can also overheal as well. So Boa is really good as she provides stalling capabilities for this particular team. As well as I mentioned, being a shooter, she satisfies that class for BlackBeard. Now, when we are team building for BlackBeard, it can be a little bit of an issue. Mainly because you do need to satisfy the striker, slashers, fighters, and shooter. As long as you have one of them on the team somewhere, everyone will get his full captain ability of going through the defensive effects and get his multipliers. As you can see on this particular stage on Kids Lackeys, this is where BlackBeard also shines, as normally this barrier can be an issue. On turn 1, you get a full board of negative orbs, and getting through that original barrier to take out the fire breather guy can actually be a bit of a concern for some teams. But with BlackBeard, he just says, nah, we can just blow through that. And because we have the overheal mechanic from Luffy and Sanji, we can actually stall on this stage, as you can see here, mainly so we can get all of our specials back. The big one we want is the Boa special by the next stage, but the other characters do need a bit of cooldown as well. So on to the next stage now against Killer. This is where the Boa effect comes in handy again. Boa is really, really strong, mainly for this particular forest, but especially on this particular team, as not only does she give the Mirror ability, she gives a lot of healing for 5 freaking turns, as well as giving cooldowns, which is really essential. I think we pop her special off something like 3 times in this entire, like this whole run. So she's actually really, really strong for BlackBeard for this long content. As you'll see against Killer here, he does have that rainbow shield effect, but we can just sort of attack our way through it, as BlackBeard really doesn't care about the defensive effects. But with Killer on this particular stage, he does have that counter mechanic, so we do need to make sure that we can kill him in one go. But with the Roger special and 3 of our side units, we can actually easily do that. So talking about team building when it comes to BlackBeard, it does get a little bit tricky, mainly because you do need those 4 base classes, and it doesn't sound too tricky like on paper, but in practicality it actually can be a big issue, especially if you are looking to get around certain defects. So finding like especially a shooter can be a huge issue. On this next stage against Big Mom, you just need to be careful if you are using this team. If your BlackBeard gets binded, you do need to reload the app. So just have your fingers ready, as you want your BlackBeard to stay unbinded. That way he can remove the binds, he can give you a full board of orbs, and then you can use the Luffy Sanji special to actually get a 2.5 times attack boost, as well as the overheal mechanic, which is really, really nice for BlackBeard. The Luffy Sanji sub, he is our fighter for this particular team. They are actually ridiculously strong, as because BlackBeard doesn't have any defensive capabilities, in terms of damage reduction or threshold. The big thing about BlackBeard that you want to do is actually get some healing characters. Healing is the best thing for BlackBeard to store, as he provides such a large HP pool, as well as not reducing the recovery like V2 BlackBeard does. So having characters that can heal, especially stuff like Boa, things like Luffy and Sanji, work ridiculously well. As if you can get that overheal mechanic off, as you can see that we have right here, it helps out significantly, like ridiculously. If you are using ships like the BlackBeard ship, if you are using ships like the Moby Dick, that also give you a lot of HP, that overheal mechanic and Boa's end of turn healing for 5 turns can actually be ridiculously useful. If you are trying this team, you do need to be careful. You do want to reload the app and make sure that your captains don't get blown away. Otherwise, you will lose that overheal mechanic. You will lose a lot of damage, as this team actually did this forest very comfortably until this particular point. But against page 1, as you can see, I'm preparing myself to close the app if I lose my captains. But against page 1, it does become a little bit finicky, as you do need to make sure that your captains don't get blown away. It's really not that hard. I did beat this stage like 3 or 4 times when I was doing these runs. Actually, that's a lie. I think I did it like, this was my 3rd time beating this stage. I think I failed once because I like didn't even kill X-Drake. But on this particular stage, when it's page 1, it does rely on a bit of glitching to sort of get through the content. But most other teams actually abuse this mechanic as well. Namely, actually, my versus Kaido and Big Mom team. So there's also that. Once you do get past this stage, though, it's pretty much smooth sailing for the rest of the fight, as long as you do have a nice chunky HP pool. If you are using this team, Luffy Sanji can provide meat orbs every single turn, which really helps the stalling capabilities for this particular team and really keeps us alive. Without those defensive capabilities that BlackBeard negates with his captain ability, it really hinders how much like tankiness this character has. He is all about sort of cheesing and sort of breaking through barriers and getting through defensive effects, as a good BlackBeard should, right? But I would have really wished if they sort of honed in on the more Quake side of things when it came to V1 BlackBeard, as they really just focus on the Dark fruit with actually like both of his captains, or both characters that he has in the game. Obviously on Japan they do have a bit of recognition for the Quake fruit, but over here on Global we've really only got V1 BlackBeard and V2 BlackBeard, and it's all about his Dark fruit. Now, talking about team building once again with this particular unit, I would have really loved if they changed his classes to even give him one of the original classes. Just would have made team building with this character a lot better. In saying that, though, he did get a fairly significant buff as his multiplier is increased. He has a very good limit break key. He does make Dex Orbs matching, as you can see, which actually helps this particular team out a lot, as any extra orbs that you guys can get, especially with just built into captains, is actually really good. He also gets bind removal on his special, as you saw on the Big Mom stage, as well as block orb manipulation, which is a nice little touch, I think. But just to sort of put the cherry on the top of this unit, I would have really loved if they gave him either Striker, because of the Quake fruit, very similar to Whitebeard, or even giving him something like Shooter. The Striker and Shooter classes are 2 of the harder classes to fill with this particular unit. But if you can find characters that have strikers and slashers in their kit, or have like striker and fighter, or have slasher and fighter, any of the 2 classes built into one unit, it's going to make team building with this particular unit very easy. As you can see on this particular stage, King actually has damage reduction and threshold. He also gives despair, which Roger gets around nicely. But this particular stage is actually a bit of a struggle for most teams, as King puts up a new barrier every single turn. It does go through all the colors. I think it starts on int, and then it goes quick, strength, it goes int, quick, dex, strength, psi, I think, something like that. And because he has the damage reduction and the threshold, as well as binding our ship, this stage for some teams can actually be a big issue. But with the special of Boa, once again, we can just utilize the end of turn healing. We don't actually use the Mero ability here, we just literally utilize her healing, as with Luffy Sanji's switch ability, getting a meat orb every turn, as well as her healing, we can actually heal back more damage than King is actually outputting. So staying alive on this particular stage is very easy. But as I was saying, if BlackBeard just had one of those classes, whether it be Shooter or Striker, I don't really see him being a slasher or a fighter somehow. Maybe you could argue fighter, but I think Striker and Shooter are probably the 2 most optimal. Striker to me makes the most sense because like every Whitebeard is a Striker, right? But look, it is what it is, and just finding subs can be a bit of a tricky situation. The final thing about BlackBeard that actually makes him really good is he is a powerhouse and driven class. So Powerhouse have always had a very, very good base. So the fact that they didn't take Powerhouse away from him is still a very big buff. And Driven, obviously, it does get better on Japan, but at the moment on Global, it's still a little bit off the mark. He is a Dex color too, which is great because Dex do need the help, but unfortunately for him, he's not a traditional Dex captain, obviously. He's a Rainbow captain as long as you have all those classes. But the fact that he is Dex sort of hinders him a little bit, as Dex kind of sucks, you know. It's probably it's arguably the worst color in the entire game on OPTC Global. But you could make an argument for Quick as well. But because he's Powerhouse, you do have access to a lot of very good ships. You do have his ship from his forest. You have the Zunisha. You have the Rocket Man. You have the traditional ships, the Moby Dick and the Going Merry. There's a lot of very good ships that can work with BlackBeard. But nevertheless, this team was a lot of fun and actually managed to clear this forest fairly well, besides that page 1 stage, but he's not the only one that struggles with that particular stage. Like I said, if you do want to try this team, just pause the video at the start. That way you can see the supports. I think we're using Brule, we're using Conus, who are limited rare recruit supports. But I don't think you really need Conus. You definitely need a Kainu on Dawn Krieg and Jin. But that's going to wrap this video up and the end of the showcase for BlackBeard, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to go down there and belt that like button for me. And if you are new to my channel, consider hitting that big red subscribe button too. But guys, wherever you are in this beautiful world, make sure to enjoy the rest of your day. As always, I thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one. Lates!